Run if you want, Claire. I'll know exactly where you are. Adrian Cole had whispered those words beside me less than an hour after we became husband and wife, and 12 minutes later, I was climbing over the back fence of his estate in my wedding dress. I told myself he had been bluffing. I had to believe that, because the alternative meant I had just tried to escape the most powerful mafia boss in New York while he already knew my plan. My shoes were gone. I had abandoned them beside the service stairs when the heels started slowing me down. Cold grass pressed beneath my bare feet as I lifted the hem of my dress and ran toward the catering van waiting beyond the kitchens. Everything had been prepared. A canvas jacket was hidden behind the passenger seat. $400 in cash sat inside my purse. No phone, no credit cards, nothing Adrian could trace. I had spent 3 weeks planning this moment while pretending to accept the marriage my father's unfinished business had somehow dragged me into. Yet something felt wrong. It was too easy. Adrian's estate had cameras covering every entrance. Men in dark suits had guarded the grounds throughout our wedding reception. Nobody entered or left without his permission. But tonight, one camera turned away seconds before I crossed its path. The service gate stood unlocked. Even the guard normally stationed near the kitchens had disappeared. Every door that should have stopped me seemed to open. I ignored the warning tightening in my stomach and climbed into the van. The driver knew nothing. I had paid him to drop a package at a gas station 18 miles north. He thought I was another exhausted employee hitching a ride after the wedding. As the estate disappeared behind us, I finally breathed. I had done it. I had escaped Adrian Cole. What I didn't know was that 3 floors above the ballroom, Adrian stood behind a dark window, watching the van's taillights disappear beyond his gates. Marcus Hale, his most trusted lieutenant, entered the room carrying a thin folder. "She's gone," Marcus said. Adrian didn't turn around. He didn't shout. Adrian never needed to. Men twice his size went silent when he lowered his voice. "I know." Marcus hesitated. "I'll have her back before she reaches the highway." "No." One word stopped him. Adrian walked to his desk and opened the folder. Inside was a photograph taken 48 hours earlier, one of his senior men meeting secretly with someone connected to the Moretti family. For 6 months, money had been disappearing from Adrian's organization. Routes had been compromised. Private decisions had somehow reached his rivals before his own captains heard them. Someone inside the Cole organization was feeding information to an enemy, and 3 days before our wedding, Adrian intercepted a message that changed everything. The traitor wasn't asking about his businesses anymore. He was asking about me. Adrian had spent years building a criminal empire by understanding one simple truth. Frightened men made mistakes when they believed an opportunity had appeared. My escape looked exactly like that opportunity. Marcus stared toward the highway. What if they reach her first? Adrian finally looked away from the window. His expression remained perfectly calm. "They won't hurt her." "How can you know?" Adrian placed another photograph on the desk. This one showed my father, Thomas Bennett, taken shortly before the accident that killed him 2 years earlier. Adrian's eyes settled on it. "Because Claire isn't what they want." Marcus frowned. "Then what do they want?" Adrian closed the folder. What her father left behind. And 18 miles away, believing I had finally disappeared from my mafia boss husband's world, I had no idea my escape wasn't the end of Adrian Cole's plan. It was the beginning. I should have felt safe when the highway swallowed the last lights of Adrian's estate behind me. Instead, I kept looking through the rear window because freedom had never felt this carefully arranged. The catering driver dropped me at a gas station 18 miles north, exactly as promised. I changed inside the restroom, folding what remained of my wedding dress into a trash bag and pulling on jeans, sneakers, and the gray canvas jacket I had hidden earlier. By midnight, I was riding in a cab toward a bus terminal under the name Claire Miller. No phone, no cards, cash only. I bought a ticket north, changed buses once, then paid another driver to take me to a roadside motel nearly 90 miles from Manhattan. Every choice was meant to make me invisible. Back at the Cole estate, Adrian was doing the opposite. He wanted someone to notice. At 2 in the morning, he summoned 6 senior members of his organization into his private office. Marcus Hale stood beside the door while Adrian placed an empty black folder on the table. He told them I had escaped carrying a financial ledger belonging to the Cole organization. It was a lie. I had never seen a ledger. That was the point. Adrian watched the room instead of explaining himself. One man asked whether I understood what I supposedly possessed. Another demanded permission to search for me. A third, Raymond Pierce, said nothing at all. Adrian noticed that. 10 minutes after the meeting ended, Raymond left through the east entrance instead of returning to his apartment in Manhattan. Marcus followed the movement through their security network. 23 minutes later, a prepaid telephone connected briefly to a tower near the Hudson River. One call. 17 seconds. Adrian looked at the number on Marcus's screen and quietly said, "Do not touch him." Marcus frowned. "He just gave us our first lead." Exactly. Adrian wanted Raymond comfortable enough to make another mistake. While he began mapping the call against Moretti contacts, I checked into the Cedar Pines motel and finally allowed myself to breathe. The room smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. The heater rattled. The curtains did not quite meet in the middle. It was perfect. Ordinary. Anonymous. I locked the door, pushed a chair beneath the handle, and sat on the edge of the bed. That was when I noticed my wedding ring. I had removed everything else connected to Adrian, yet somehow the ring remained on my finger. I twisted it once, then stopped. Outside, headlights moved slowly across the curtains. A black sedan rolled through the parking lot. My stomach tightened. It continued past my room and disappeared. 5 minutes later, I heard something soft against the door. I waited. Silence. When I finally looked, the hallway was empty. A cream envelope rested on the carpet. My name was written across it. Not Claire Miller. Claire Bennett. Inside was a photograph of my father, Thomas, standing outside a building I did not recognize. He looked nervous. Younger. Alive. I turned the photograph over, and my breath stopped. There were only 7 words written on the back. Ask your husband what happened October 14th. I read them twice. Then a third time. October 14th was the day my father died. I had never told Adrian that date. I called Adrian before fear could convince me not to. He answered on the first ring. October 14th, I said. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. That frightened me more. Where are you, Claire? His voice was calm, almost too calm. You first. What happened that day? Another pause. Your father died. I know that. I gripped the photograph until its edge pressed into my palm. Someone left his picture outside my motel room and told me to ask you about it. His voice changed by half a degree. With Adrian, that was enough to mean danger. Describe the photograph. Answer me. Claire. No, you do not get to give orders tonight. The silence stretched between us. Then he said, your father handled financial records for one of my companies. I stopped breathing. Thomas Bennett had spent my childhood telling me he was an accountant for private businesses. Boring businesses. Safe businesses. He worked for you? Not directly. He was not part of my organization. He discovered money moving through accounts that should have been dormant. Adrian spoke with the precision of someone choosing which truths I was allowed to hear. He believed someone inside my organization was transferring funds to an outside group. And then he died. Yes. Was his accident really an accident? Adrian did not answer. That was answer enough. I looked at the photograph again. Is that why you married me? This silence was longer. My chest tightened. Adrian, tell me where you are. Not until you answer. Claire, whoever delivered that photograph already knows where you are. This stopped being an escape the moment that envelope reached your door. I hated that he was right. I hated even more that he had avoided my question. You married me because of my father. There are things you do not know yet. Then tell me. Not over this line. The call ended. I stared at the telephone, furious enough to forget I was afraid. 90 miles away, Adrian stood over a map while Marcus traced the prepaid telephone Raymond Pierce had used after the meeting. The number had contacted another disposable line registered nowhere useful, but its signal had appeared near my motel less than 20 minutes before I called Adrian. Someone inside the Cole organization had found me faster than they should have. Adrian gave Marcus one instruction. Follow the second line. Leave Raymond alone. He was not chasing me. He was chasing whoever was chasing me. I packed immediately. When I stepped outside, the parking lot was almost empty. A middle-aged man in a brown coat stood beside the ice machine. Mrs. Cole. I froze. Wrong person. Thomas Bennett told me you would say that. He held out a small silver drive. Your father wanted you to have this if anything happened to him. I stared at it. My father has been dead for 2 years. That is why you need it now. I reached for the drive. Headlights swept across us. A black sedan turned sharply into the lot. The man stepped backward. Do not give this to your husband until you know who he was protecting. He pressed the drive into my hand and hurried between the parked cars. I turned toward the sedan for 1 second. 1 second. When I looked down again, my hand was empty. Someone stood behind me. A quiet male voice said, "Adrian Cole is not the only man watching you." I did not turn around. If you wanted to frighten me, congratulations. The man behind me gave a quiet laugh. If I wanted to frighten you, Mrs. Cole, I would have mentioned that the black sedan belongs to your husband. My eyes snapped toward the parking lot. The sedan had stopped beneath a broken light. Engine running, windows dark. Who are you? Someone offering you the conversation Adrian will not. 20 minutes later, I was sitting inside the back room of a closed restaurant 3 miles from the motel, across from Vincent Moretti. I knew the name. Everyone in Adrian's world did. Moretti was another mafia boss, older than Adrian, silver-haired, composed, and powerful enough that men waited for his permission before sitting down. Nobody had forced me into the car. That almost made it worse. Vincent placed the missing silver drive on the table between us. "Your messenger works for me," he said. Then this was staged. The delivery was. "The drive is not. Why should I believe you? You should not. You married Adrian Cole. Suspicion should become a survival skill." He slid a photograph toward me. My father stood outside a Manhattan hotel beside Adrian. The date printed in the corner was October 11th, 3 days before my father's death. Adrian told me my father discovered money being stolen from his organization. That part is true. Vincent folded his hands. The interesting question is who Thomas Bennett believed was stealing it. Before I could answer, the restaurant door opened. Every man in the room became still. Adrian walked in alone. No raised voice. No visible panic. He simply removed his coat and looked at Vincent. "You borrowed something that belongs in my family." Anger burned through me. "I do not belong to you." Adrian's eyes shifted to mine. Something softened for 1 second, then disappeared. "I was talking about the drive." Vincent smiled faintly. "Your wife has better instincts than half your captains." Adrian ignored him. "Raymond Pierce contacted one of your numbers tonight." Vincent's smile vanished. "Raymond does not work for me." "I know." That changed the room. Adrian placed his telephone on the table. A map showed 3 financial accounts, 2 warehouse leases, and a chain of calls moving between men from both organizations. "Someone wants us blaming each other," Adrian said. While I had been running, he had frozen 3 money routes, closed access to 2 warehouses, and fed different information to his own captains to see which version reached Moretti territory. This was not a husband chasing his missing bride. This was a mafia boss hunting a traitor inside his empire. Vincent studied the screen. "You came here alone for this?" Adrian looked at me. "No. I came because someone believed taking my wife would make me careless." His gaze returned to Vincent. I wanted him to believe it longer. My stomach dropped. Even this meeting was part of Adrian's plan. Vincent reached into the folder beside him and produced another photograph. My father, Adrian, and a third man whose face had been deliberately scratched from the image. "Then perhaps it is time Claire learned why Thomas was afraid of you." Adrian went completely still. Vincent pushed the photograph toward me. "Ask your husband who ordered your father's death." I looked at Adrian. "Tell me." For the first time since I had met the most controlled man in New York, Adrian Cole had no answer. Adrian finally answered with 4 words that changed my marriage. "I do not know." Vincent Moretti leaned back, almost amused, but I kept my eyes on my husband. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked. "No," Adrian said. "I expect you to listen." He took the photograph from the table and tapped the scratched-out face. "Your father discovered money leaving accounts connected to my organization and Moretti's. Someone was building a private network between both families, using companies neither side knew had been compromised." Vincent's expression hardened. "Thomas came to me first." Adrian nodded. "Then he came to me. 3 days later, my father was dead." The room suddenly felt too small. "So who ordered it?" Adrian looked directly at me. "That is what I have spent 2 years trying to prove." Vincent pushed the silver drive across the table. Adrian did not touch it. "Thomas built an encrypted archive," Vincent said. "He separated the key from the files so nobody could open it without something only Claire would recognize." My throat tightened. "Why me?" "Because he trusted his daughter more than he trusted either mafia boss in this room." Adrian's jaw shifted slightly. "I understood then. That is why you married me." He did not look away. At first, those 2 words hurt more than any lie he could have invented. At first, I stood. You brought me into your house because I was a key? Because people were already looking for you. You could have told me. You would have refused my protection. Exactly. My voice shook, but I did not lower it. That was my choice. Adrian said nothing. For once, his silence did not feel powerful. It felt guilty. You did not protect me, I said. You decided for me. I pushed past him and stepped into the empty dining room. He followed but stopped several feet away. No grabbing. No command. Claire. I turned. Did you let me escape because you knew someone would follow me? A long second passed. Yes. The answer landed cold. So I was bait. You were never unprotected. That is not the same thing. His eyes held mine. He knew it. Before either of us could speak again, Marcus called. Adrian answered immediately. His expression changed as he listened. Raymond Pierce had led them to an internal account, and every transaction pointed toward Marcus Hale himself. Adrian returned to the back room and showed Vincent the records. Marcus had access to routes, money, schedules, everything required to manipulate both organizations. By sunrise, Adrian had Marcus brought to a private Cole office in Manhattan. I went with him because I was finished accepting partial truths. Marcus sat across from Adrian without fear. Adrian placed the transaction records on the desk. Explain. Marcus glanced at them and smiled without humor. You finally found your traitor. Adrian waited. Marcus reached inside his coat and removed a small recorder. Too bad you found the wrong one. He pressed play. Static filled the room. Then a familiar voice came through the speaker. My knees nearly gave way. I had heard that voice every morning of my childhood. My father's. If Adrian is hearing this, then Cross has moved sooner than I expected. I stared at the recorder. Adrian looked at the date embedded in the file. His face went completely still. The recording had been made 3 months after Thomas Bennett was supposed to have died. My father's voice should not have existed 3 months after his funeral. I reached for the recorder, but Adrian's hand moved first, stopping Marcus from switching it off. Play everything. Marcus obeyed. Static crackled, then Thomas Bennett spoke again. Cross believes the accounts are invisible. They are not. I separated the records from the key. Claire will recognize what opens them, but only when she knows where to look. My chest tightened at the sound of my name. The recording ended 12 seconds later. I stared at Marcus. Was my father alive? For a while, he said quietly. After the crash, Thomas disappeared because he believed the person hunting him had access to both Cole's security and law enforcement contacts. I helped him stay hidden. Adrian's expression turned colder. Without telling me, Thomas did not know who he could trust. Including me? Marcus held his gaze. Especially you. The room went silent. I expected Adrian to punish the challenge. Instead, he asked the only useful question. Cross. Daniel Cross. Marcus nodded. Daniel was Adrian's senior advisor, a man who had attended our wedding, stood 20 feet from me during the vows, and congratulated me afterward with a polite smile. My stomach turned. Adrian immediately shifted into command. He ordered Cross's accounts isolated, his access codes canceled, and every captain given different instructions about where Adrian would supposedly move the financial archive. He was not protecting me now. He was closing a trap around his own organization. Then he looked at me. You are going back to the estate. No, Claire. My father left the key for me. You married me because of it. You let me run because of it. You do not get to lock me outside the truth now. His jaw tightened. For several seconds, Mafia Boss and husband seemed to fight behind the same expression. Finally, Adrian stepped away from the door. Then you stay beside me, and you follow the plan. I follow it if you explain it. Marcus almost smiled. Adrian did not. But he agreed. For the first time, I entered the private strategy room beneath the Cole estate as something other than Adrian's bride. Maps covered one wall. Financial records filled another. The silver drive sat between us. I remembered my father's message. Something I would recognize. The password screen displayed one question. Where did we always go home? I knew immediately. My father used to call our old house on Hawthorne Lane his true north, even years after we moved. I entered the street number and the name of the maple tree I had planted there when I was 8. The drive opened. Hundreds of coded transactions appeared. Marcus leaned closer. Adrian did not celebrate. He studied patterns, dates, transfers, names hidden behind shell companies. Then he stopped. One recurring authorization belonged to Daniel Cross. Found him, Marcus whispered. Adrian shook his head. No. We found the man who wants us to think we found him. Seconds later, one of Adrian's men called. Cross had disappeared less than an hour earlier, taking copies of financial records with him. Adrian traced the last account Cross accessed. An address appeared on the screen. I recognized it before anyone spoke. Hawthorne Lane, my childhood home. Then Adrian's telephone received a message from an unknown number. He read it once and handed it to me. Bring the bride. I will bring her father. Adrian read the message twice, then deleted it. You are not going. I looked at him across the strategy table. You said I would have a choice. His eyes held mine. You do. Then I am going. For several seconds, nobody moved. Marcus watched Adrian carefully, probably expecting the Mafia Boss to end the argument with one command. Instead, Adrian nodded once. Then we do it my way. Within 20 minutes, the room changed. Hawthorne Lane became a grid on the wall. Adrian marked every entrance, neighboring property, access road, and camera. Marcus would monitor Cross's financial network while 3 Cole teams quietly closed the routes leading away from the neighborhood. Another team would release false information claiming Adrian had moved the original archive downtown. If Cross had partners inside the organization, they would react. Adrian was not walking into a trap. He was building a larger one around it. We reached Hawthorne Lane shortly before sunrise. My childhood house looked smaller than I remembered. White siding, green shutters. The maple tree I planted when I was 8 still stood near the porch. Adrian stopped beside me. Once we enter, you stay where I can see you. That sounds like an order. It is a request. That difference mattered more than I wanted it to. We stepped inside. The house was empty except for a speaker on the dining room table. Then my father's voice filled the room. Claire. My heart stopped. Dad. I moved forward. Adrian caught my attention with one look, not touching me. Listen. The voice continued, repeating words I remembered from childhood. For one impossible second, hope overwhelmed reason. Then Adrian said quietly, It is a recording. I stared at him. How do you know? The background clock repeats every 41 seconds. He had noticed what grief would not let me hear. A door opened at the far end of the room. Daniel Cross stepped out, calm and perfectly dressed, as if he had arrived for a business meeting. Thomas really is dead, Claire. I am sorry. My hope collapsed. You brought us here for a recording? Adrian asked. Cross smiled. I brought you here to let your captain see what marriage has done to you. Adrian Cole used to protect an empire. Now he walks into traps for one woman. Adrian barely reacted. Is that what you told them? Cross's smile weakened. Adrian's telephone vibrated. Marcus had completed his part. 3 accounts Cross depended on had been frozen. 2 captains who responded to the false archive location had exposed themselves. Moretti had simultaneously blocked Cross from shifting money through his territory. Cross looked toward the window, finally understanding. You knew this was false. Adrian glanced at the speaker. Before I left my house, anger flashed across me. You knew my father would not be here? Adrian looked at me. I knew the message was designed to bring us here. I did not know what Cross had waiting. Then why come? His attention returned to Cross. Because for 2 years he communicated through other men. Tonight, he finally stood in front of me. Cross had expected me to make Adrian weaker. Instead, my presence had forced Cross into the open. Then I remembered the silver drive. While Adrian kept Cross talking, I opened the decoded archive on my telephone and searched the authorization sequence my father had hidden beneath the Hawthorne address. Another file appeared. Not transactions. Names. I opened it. Cross was there, but not first. The first name belonged to someone I had seen standing beside Adrian in our wedding photographs. Someone Adrian trusted enough to call family. I turned the screen toward him. Adrian read the name, and for the first time that morning, all the cold certainty disappeared from his face. Richard Cole. His uncle. Adrian stared at his uncle's name for 3 seconds, and somehow that silence felt more dangerous than anger. Richard Cole was the man who had taught him how to run an empire, the man who had stood beside him after his father's death, the man who had raised a glass at our wedding and called me family. Cross worked for Richard, Marcus said through Adrian's telephone. Adrian's expression closed again. Not worked. Answered. By 8 that morning, Adrian had transformed my father's hidden archive into a weapon without raising his voice once. He called every senior captain to the Cole estate. He sent Vincent Moretti copies of the transactions involving Moretti accounts. He froze every company connected to Cross and quietly removed Richard's authority from the organization's financial network before Richard even knew the meeting had begun. I sat beside Marcus in the strategy room while Adrian faced 12 men who had spent years believing Richard Cole was untouchable. Richard arrived last. Silver-haired, perfectly composed. He looked at Adrian with something almost paternal. "You called an emergency meeting over Daniel Cross?" Adrian placed my father's records on the table. "No, over you." Nobody spoke. Richard glanced at the documents and smiled. An accountant's notes from 2 years ago. Bank transfers. Shell companies. Authorization records. Cross's communications. Marcus's testimony. Moretti's records. Adrian revealed each piece slowly, leaving Richard nowhere to redirect the accusation. The truth assembled itself in front of everyone. Richard had moved money between both organizations, leaked information to create distrust, and used Cross to build a private alliance for men who believed Adrian and Moretti were becoming weak. My father had discovered it. Richard had discovered my father knew. "Thomas should have stayed with numbers," Richard said quietly. My hands went cold. Adrian did not move. "You arranged his death." Richard's silence answered. Then Adrian delivered the final blow without threatening anyone. He displayed the accounts Richard had promised to his supporters. They were empty. Adrian had already transferred control back to the legitimate divisions of his organization. The captains Richard thought belonged to him began stepping away. Power disappeared from my husband's uncle, one person at a time. Richard looked around the room and finally understood that Adrian had defeated him before inviting him inside. "You learned well," Richard said. Adrian's answer was almost a whisper. "Not from you." By noon, Richard had no authority left in the Cole organization. Cross's network was dismantled, and the secret war my father had uncovered was over. I should have felt relieved. Instead, one detail kept circling my mind. Richard had known exactly where I went after the wedding. I found Adrian alone in his office. "You suspected him before we married." Adrian looked at me. He could have lied. He did not. "Yes." "And when I escaped, you knew Richard might follow me." "Yes." My chest tightened. "You used me as bait." Another pause. "Yes." The honesty hurt worse than denial. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on his desk. Adrian looked at it, but never reached for me. "I thought you were protecting me," I said. "I was," without asking whether I wanted the price. His eyes lowered for the first time. "I spent my life believing that if I could keep someone safe, I had earned the right to decide for them." He opened a drawer, removed my passport, and placed it beside the ring. I was wrong. I waited for the condition. None came. "Where am I allowed to go?" I asked. Adrian met my eyes. "Anywhere." I left that afternoon. No black sedan followed me. No Cole man appeared at the airport. 3 weeks later, Marcus entered Adrian's office with the daily security report. "Do you want us to continue watching, Mrs. Cole?" Adrian looked at the empty chair across from his desk. "No." And for the first time since the day Adrian Cole met me, the Mafia Boss had no idea where I was. 3 months passed before I walked through Adrian Cole's gates again, and this time nobody had been ordered to bring me there. I had spent those months rebuilding a life that belonged entirely to me. Adrian had spent them rebuilding his empire. Richard's influence was gone. Daniel Cross's network had collapsed. Marcus remained at Adrian's side, and a new agreement with Vincent Moretti had ended the quiet war my father died trying to expose. Adrian was still exactly what he had always been, a mafia boss. Powerful, feared, controlled. The difference was that none of that power had been used to find me. I arrived after midnight through the same service gate I had escaped through on our wedding night. It was unlocked again, but this time I knew why. Adrian was in his office when a security alert appeared on his screen. He looked at the image, went completely still, then walked downstairs alone. I waited in the room where our marriage had almost ended before it began. He stopped in the doorway. "Claire." Just my name. No command. No question about where I had been. "You were not watching me," I said. "No. Not even once." "No." I searched his face. "How did you know I would come back?" Adrian's answer came without hesitation. "I did not." That was the moment I finally believed him. The old Adrian would have calculated my route, predicted my decision, placed someone 20 feet behind me, and called it protection. This man had accepted the possibility that I might never return. I took my wedding ring from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. 3 months ago, I ran because being your wife felt like becoming something you owned. His expression tightened, but he let me finish. If I put that ring on again, you tell me the truth even when you think the truth will make me leave. You never use me as leverage. You never decide what risks I am allowed to understand. And if your world touches my life, I get a voice in what happens to me. Adrian looked at the ring, then at me. Agreed. That easily? No. His voice lowered. Nothing about it is easy. But it is still your choice. I almost smiled. Almost. And if I leave again? Then the door opens. I walked toward it. Adrian remained where he was. My hand closed around the handle. I opened the door and stared into the quiet hallway. Nobody blocked it. No guards waited outside. No footsteps moved behind me. 3 months earlier, I had crossed this house barefoot in a wedding dress, terrified that freedom depended on whether I could outrun Adrian Cole. Now freedom stood 5 inches beyond an open doorway, and the most powerful man I knew made no attempt to stop me. I could leave. That was precisely why I turned around. Adrian had not moved. I closed the door myself, crossed the room, picked up the ring, and slid it onto my finger. His eyes dropped to it, but he said nothing. He understood that silence mattered. I am not yours, Adrian. I know. I am here because I chose to be. His expression softened in the smallest way. I know that too. On our first wedding night, I believed Adrian's greatest power was his ability to find me anywhere. I had been wrong. He ruled men who feared disappointing him, controlled an empire built on secrets, and could make an entire room fall silent without raising his voice. But none of that was the hardest thing he ever did. The hardest thing was opening his hand when he wanted to hold on. He had watched me leave once because it served his plan. Then he let me leave again, knowing I might never return. That was the difference between possession and love. And in the end, the Mafia boss who could have followed me anywhere finally learned that if he wanted me to come home, he had to stop following.